I would actually like to start to pick up with the very thing that you said in the end about this, the effectiveness of this democratic assistance, both by the EU and by the US. And since you mentioned this independent variable connection, is there also a consideration on the EUS and the lobby and the EU to actually lobby a little bit both society and some activists within the country that somehow do not feel that they need to do the regime change if it's autocratic, or is this out of question because they know already that this is not working?
Yeah, that's a great question, Maciej. Thank you. And, the lobbying sort of you're talking about is, let's say, very indirect, right? And it rather happens through local non-governmental organizations, right? In terms of really, the granting schemes, right, that are provided by the United States and Europe, right? Europe also has the so-called European Endowment for Democracy, which is very similar to the National Endowment for Democracy that the United States has. And this European Endowment for Democracy, might know, is something that has been drafted and pushed forward by the Polish government, actually, by your Foreign Minister Sikorski some years ago, right? And these schemes that they have are very flexible, and they can provide funding, for example, to individual bloggers and activists, right? So what the European Endowment for Democracy is doing, if you go onto their website, you can ask for a grant if you're like from an authoritarian country, you're a blogger that is being oppressed, and you can't work or whatever, but you have a blog that is attracting people, that is helping to disseminate some kind of information about the malpractices and the oppressions of the given regime. That is something, right, that the money that is provided by these organizations would fund, right? So helping to fund the groups, to keep those groups in operation, right? Economically, to keep them above water, right? Who can serve as the mouthpiece, let's say, for the Western democracies to support the ideas of liberalism, of market capitalism, of democracy in these countries, right? So it's mostly through these, let's say, proxy individual activists, proxy non-governmental organizations, or even some, quasi-organized underground political parties, right? That the U.S. and the EU would be sort of lobbying, right, the local societies, and trying to bring these ideas, right, and trying to point, let's say, to ideas that the government is not, functioning too well, right? That's why, the EU and especially the US, right, also focuses very much within the context of, democracy assistance. It focuses on anti-corruption and transparency in government, right? So tracking the corruption scandals that would otherwise in authoritarian regimes never see the light of day, right? Tracking these kinds of scandals and to help them to sort of put them into the public debate of the local societies is also part of sort of shaming the local governments and helping to create some kind of an atmosphere where the people start to question, the local people, right, start to question the legitimacy of their government, right? And this then might lead to more frustrations within the society and more sort of push, more mobilization, more bottom-up mobilization against their government, right? But obviously, it is linked to how penetrable, right, that society is, right? It's impossible for the EU or the United States to fund these kinds of things in North Korea, for example, right? Because it's such a closed society, right, that lacks the basic structures of civil society, even some kind of underground opposition, or we don't know of it, and it very likely does not exist, right? And the restrictions on the part of the government are so hard, right? So harsh, right? That these kinds of things in such a closed society just cannot work, right? So there's no penetration. So and obviously that's the reason. That's the reason why Russia has barred National Endowment for Democracy, I believe, even the USAID, from operating in Russia, right? Because the National Endowment for Democracy was, for example, if I'm not mistaken, one of its projects had history lessons, funded history lessons and history textbooks, I think, for young Russian children, right? And again, with, let's say, a different perception and different interpretations of, what happened during the Cold War, what happened during the Second World War, et cetera, et cetera. And this is something that obviously, the Russian government saw as as American propaganda, as disinformation and whatsoever, right? So on the basis of this and other projects, it has banned, operation of these organizations on its territory. Nonetheless, there is still ways on how, both the National Endowment for Democracy and other institutions find ways on how to sort of funnel money into Russia, right, to help civil society groups and activists, even when they are barred from officially, officially operating in the country. And at the same time, Russian NGOs, right, once they receive funding from external sources, they become labeled as foreign agents, and thereby, it's much more difficult for them to operate within the Russian system, because then they are harassed by the government in terms of bookkeeping, taxes, etc., these kinds of things, right? So it is this kind of lobbying, right, that the authoritarian regimes are trying to sort of tackle, because that's the most problematic for them. That's an annoyance for them, right? But it is something that the EU and the US are doing quite actively.